Hello, and welcome to this AWS Academy Cloud Architecture demonstration. In this segment, we're going to be discussing how to use AWS Lambda with Amazon S3. AWS Lambda is a compute service that runs your code in response to events and automatically manages the compute resources for you. This makes it easy to build applications that respond quickly to new information. AWS Lambda starts running your code within milliseconds of an event, such as an image upload, an application activity, a website click, or output from a connected device. You can also use AWS Lambda to create new backend services where compute resources are automatically triggered based on custom requests. First things first, it is important to know what the sequence of events is going to be. So in this diagram, we clarify that a user will upload an object to the source bucket in Amazon S3. This is going to manufacture an object-created event. So Amazon S3 will detect this object-created event and will publish the object-created event to the AWS Lambda function by invoking the function and passing the event data as a parameter. The AWS Lambda function then runs, and from the event data that it receives, the function knows the source bucket name and the object key name. So the Lambda function will read the object and create a thumbnail version using built-in graphics libraries onto the package that we will upload. It then saves the thumbnail to the target bucket. We are looking here at our AWS console, and we're going to be navigating to the S3 service. Once we are on the S3 service, we're going to be creating a bucket, and we're going to call it images-1160. We're going to leave the region the same and click Create. Now that we have the bucket images-1160, we're going to be creating a second bucket with the exact same name, but the suffix resize. Again, we're going to leave the region exactly the same and click on Create. So now we get to see that we have two buckets, one for the source image and one for the result image, which is expected to be a thumbnail version of it. What are we going to use in order to test? Well, we're going to be using this picture, which is a happy face.jpg. This is a relatively large image. And if we go into the tools show inspector, we get to be able to examine how the resolution is 1280 by 853 pixels. In order to create a Lambda function, we are going to be navigating to the services and select Lambda. On the AWS landing page, we're going to be using the Create Function button. Now you get to see a number of possibilities here. Author from scratch, use a blueprint. If we select blueprint, you're going to get to appreciate some prefabricated functionality for functions that are actually common, event triggers, in order to be able to use Lambda functions. In this case, we have prepared a function all by itself, so we're going to be selecting author from scratch. For the function name, we are going to be using create thumbnail. And on the runtime environment, we're going to be selecting Python 3.7. We're going to be expanding, choosing the execution role, and we're going to be using an existing role. This role has been prefabricated as the Lambda execution role. And this role has access to the AWS Lambda service, Amazon S3 service, as well as Amazon CloudWatch service. All three services have been permitted by this role, and these are access controls that are necessary in order for the function to do its job correctly. We're going to click on Create Function, and that will provision the initial step of our Lambda function. We get to see in the middle the Create Thumbnail function. So we're going to be selecting Add Trigger. And on the Select Trigger, we're going to be using S3. Now that we have selected S3 as the trigger configuration, we're also going to be selecting the bucket in which the images are going to be originating from. That will be images 1160. For the event type that will trigger this function, we will be using all object create events. We're going to be selecting the recursive invocation and click on add. Now we have the function shell and we have the trigger properly defined. If we click on the create thumbnail on the middle of the panel, we get to see that we have a text editor in order for us to write our code from scratch. Our code has already been written, and in this particular case, we can actually use the actions button in order for us to be able to upload a file locally from our machine. In this case, we're going to upload a file from Amazon S3. We have an S3 URL and click on save. Our code now has been loaded. We are unable to edit it because the file is a little bit bigger than what is permitted. However, you get to see that we can configure environment variables, tags, monitoring tools, as well as basic settings. The main piece of the function is actually here, and you get to see it's not extensive. What we're doing is we're loading an image, and we are resizing that image into a thumbnail, which is 128 by 128. This is all packaged on a zip file, including all of the support libraries, in order to run this code appropriately. On the basic settings, we need to make some edits. The first one is that we're going to put in a description. On the description, we're going to be using create a thumbnail size image. Now, a really important item here is the handler name. For the handler, we're going to be using create thumbnail handler. This is an important item, and we need to make sure that we set the handler field correctly. Otherwise, the Lambda function will not be found, much less run exactly as we expect. We will leave all of the other settings as is and click on save. This will conclude the basic configuration of our function. Now we're going to be creating a test envelope. We're going to be manufacturing this by hand by selecting the test button. On the test button, you get to see that we have an event template. On the event template, we're going to select Amazon S3 put. For the event name, we're going to choose upload. Now, in this particular envelope, there are some items that need to change. For example, on the S3 segment, after configuration ID, you're going to see a bucket name. And in this case, it says example bucket. We need to replace that name for the name of our bucket, which is images 1160. Also, on the ARN, we again see the name example bucket. We're going to be replacing that the same way. Finally, on the object key, we need to indicate the name of the file that will be used. In our case, happyface.jpg. Okay, and we have officially created a test envelope for us to verify our Lambda function. Before we click on test, we're going to navigate back to the S3 bucket, and we're going to be uploading the needed image. Right now, the bucket images 1160 is empty. Now that it's already loaded in the bucket, we're going to navigate back to our Lambda console, where we have not only defined a function, we also have defined a test envelope. So now we're going to click on test. We get to see the result, succeeded. And if we expand the details, we get to be able to examine the runtime duration, resources configured, the request ID, the build duration, and the maximum memory utilized. We also get to see a segment of the log output for this particular test. If we navigate a little lower on the panel, we're going to be able to select the Monitoring tab. These are actually metrics that indicate what is happening with the Lambda function, what has happened with the Lambda function. So invocations is basically the number of times the function has been invoked. Duration indicates how long the function took to run in milliseconds. Errors indicates how many times the function has failed. Throttles means that when too many functions are invoked simultaneously, they will be throttled. There will be an automatic slowdown in the run of the functions. The default is 1,000 concurrent executions. Iterator age measures the age of the last record process from streaming triggers like Amazon Kinesis or Amazon DynamoDB Stream. Another item that we can do is examine logs in CloudWatch. If you click on the button View Logs in CloudWatch, and here we have more details in fine-grained visibility for the running of the Lambda function. So the event data includes the request ID, the duration in milliseconds, the build duration rounded up to the nearest 100 milliseconds, the memory size of the function, and the maximum memory that the function used. And this is in addition, any login messages or print statements from the functions are displayed in the logs. And this is in order to assist you in debugging Lambda functions. We have shown how to use AWS Lambda with Amazon S3 as an event source. One item worth verifying is navigating back to the S3 bucket, images 1160 resize, and if we select the object and open it, we expect to see a smaller version of the result. This concludes this AWS Academy Cloud Architecture demonstration. Thanks for watching.